Dealing with a narcissistic person can feel confusing, exhausting, and emotionally dangerous, especially when you are used to explaining yourself, defending your intentions, or trying harder to be understood. Narcissistic behavior often thrives in situations where one person controls the emotional rhythm of the relationship, while the other person constantly reacts. That reaction can become the narcissistic person's fuel. Whether the relationship is romantic, professional, familial, or social, the same pattern often appears. They provoke, you respond. They accuse, you explain. They withdraw, you chase. They criticize, you try to prove your worth. Over time, this cycle can leave you anxious, drained, and disconnected from your own judgment. The phrase, "make a narcissist panic," does not mean harming, humiliating, or manipulating someone back. The healthiest psychological moves are not revenge tactics. They are self-protection strategies that disrupt manipulation because they remove the emotional supply, control, and access that narcissistic behavior often depends on. When a narcissistic person realizes they can no longer pull you into chaos, guilt, fear, or constant approval seeking, they may panic because the dynamic has changed. The power they relied on is no longer working. The first psychological move that can make a narcissistic person panic is emotional non-reactivity. Narcissistic behavior often depends on getting a visible emotional response. Anger, tears, panic, long explanations, pleading, and defensiveness can all become proof that they still have influence over you. This is why many people who deal with narcissistic manipulation feel like every conversation turns into a trap. You may begin calmly, but somehow you end up apologizing for things you did not do, explaining obvious facts, or defending your character against exaggerated accusations. Emotional non-reactivity changes the entire pattern. Instead of reacting with shock, rage, or desperation, you pause, you breathe, you speak in a calm tone. You do not rush to fix their mood. You do not mirror their intensity. You stop giving the emotional performance they expect. This does not mean pretending you do not feel pain. It means refusing to hand over your nervous system as evidence that they still control the room. A narcissistic person may panic when you become emotionally steady because their usual tactics lose force. If they insult you and you do not collapse, they lose leverage. If they accuse you and you do not over-explain, they lose the argument they were trying to create. If they threaten silence and you do not chase, they lose the reward of watching you scramble. Emotional non-reactivity is powerful because it protects your peace while exposing the manipulation. You are not trying to win. You are refusing to be baited. In practice, this can sound like, "I hear that you are upset. I am not discussing this while I am being insulted." Or, "We can continue when the conversation is respectful." These statements are simple, but they create a psychological wall. The narcissistic person may push harder at first because they are testing whether the old version of you is still available. They may accuse you of being cold, uncaring, arrogant, or cruel. That reaction is often part of the pattern. The key is consistency. Emotional non-reactivity works only when it is not used as a performance. It must come from a real decision to stop sacrificing your stability for someone else's need to dominate. The second psychological move is setting firm boundaries without over-explaining them. Narcissistic people often treat boundaries as personal attacks because boundaries limit access. A boundary says, "This is where I end and you begin." For someone who is used to pushing past your comfort, your time, your privacy, your emotions, or your resources, a clear boundary can feel like a loss of control. Many people make the mistake of explaining their boundaries too much. They write long messages, provide evidence, apologize repeatedly, or try to make the narcissistic person agree that the boundary is fair. But a boundary does not require approval from the person it is protecting you from. In fact, the more you explain, the more material you may give them to twist, debate, or attack. A firm boundary is brief, specific, and followed by action. For example, I will not continue conversations that include name-calling. I am not available after 8 p.m. Do not contact me at work unless it is an emergency. Or, I am not lending money. These statements do not need a courtroom defense. Firm boundaries can make a narcissistic person panic because they interrupt entitlement. If they are used to unlimited emotional access, a boundary feels like a locked door. If they are used to making you feel guilty for saying no, your calm refusal can shock them. If they are used to controlling your schedule, your privacy, or your choices, your independence may feel threatening to their sense of superiority. The important part is not just saying the boundary, it is enforcing it. If you say, I will leave if you yell, and they yell, you leave. If you say, I will not respond to insulting texts, and they insult you, you stop responding. This is where many people struggle because guilt, fear, and trauma bonds can pull them back into the cycle. Narcissistic manipulation often trains you to believe that enforcing a boundary makes you selfish. It does not. A boundary is not punishment. It is a condition for access to you. When you stop negotiating your dignity, you become harder to control. The third psychological move is using the gray rock method. The gray rock method is a communication strategy where you become as boring, neutral, and emotionally uninteresting as possible when dealing with someone who feeds on drama. The idea is not to be rude or cruel. It is to stop providing emotional stimulation. Narcissistic behavior often seeks intensity. They may provoke you to get anger, charm you to get admiration, guilt you to get compliance, or confuse you to get dependency. Gray rock removes the reward. Your answers become short, factual, and calm. You do not reveal unnecessary personal details. You do not share emotional vulnerabilities with someone who has repeatedly used them against you. You do not argue about baiting comments. You give practical information when needed, and nothing more. For example, instead of responding to a long accusatory message with a long defense, you might say, I am available to discuss the schedule by email, or I will pick up the documents at 3 p.m. The conversation stays narrow and practical. Gray rock can make a narcissistic person panic because it cuts off narcissistic supply. Narcissistic supply is the attention, admiration, emotional reaction, validation, fear, or conflict that reinforces their sense of control and importance. When you become emotionally unavailable to their tactics, they may feel ignored, exposed, or powerless. They may escalate at first. They may become more charming, more cruel, more dramatic, or more victimized. This is sometimes called an extinction burst. When a behavior that used to work stops working, the person intensifies the behavior before giving up or changing tactics. That is why gray rock requires discipline. It is not enough to be neutral once. You must become consistently unavailable for emotional chaos. The gray rock method is especially useful when you cannot fully cut contact, such as co-parenting, shared workplaces, family obligations, or legal matters. However, it should be used carefully. In situations involving intimidation, stalking, threats, or physical danger, safety planning and professional support matter more than communication techniques. The fourth psychological move is refusing to defend yourself against every false accusation. This is difficult because narcissistic people can be skilled at triggering your need to be understood. They may accuse you of being selfish, unstable, abusive, ungrateful, disloyal, dramatic, or dishonest. If you know the accusation is unfair, your instinct may be to prove them wrong. You may gather evidence, replay conversations, quote old messages, explain your intentions, and try to force them to see the truth. But in many narcissistic dynamics, the accusation is not a misunderstanding. It is a hook. The goal is not clarity. The goal is control. When you defend yourself endlessly, the narcissistic person gets to keep you trapped in their frame. They become the judge, you become the defendant, and the relationship becomes a trial where the verdict keeps changing. Refusing to over-defend yourself can make a narcissistic person panic because it removes their ability to keep you emotionally occupied. You are no longer spending hours trying to correct a person committed to misrepresenting you. You are no longer treating every accusation as an emergency. You can respond once, calmly and briefly, and then stop. For example, "That is not accurate. I disagree with that characterization," or "I am not going to debate my intentions with you." Then you disengage. This does not mean ignoring serious issues or refusing accountability when you have genuinely caused harm. Healthy accountability is specific, mutual, and reality-based. Manipulative accusation is vague, repetitive, and designed to destabilize you. The difference matters. When you stop defending yourself against bad faith attacks, you reclaim your mental space. The narcissistic person may panic because they can no longer use accusation as a leash. The fifth psychological move is becoming independent of their validation. Narcissistic relationships often create an emotional addiction to approval. The narcissistic person may alternate between praise and criticism, affection and withdrawal, warmth and contempt. This intermittent reinforcement can be extremely powerful. You start craving the good version of them. When they approve of you, you feel relieved. When they criticize you, you feel desperate to repair the connection. Over time, their opinion can become the mirror you use to measure your worth. This is one of the most painful parts of narcissistic abuse and emotional manipulation. You may begin to forget who you were before you needed their approval to feel safe. Becoming independent of their validation means rebuilding your self-trust. It means asking, "What do I think of my choices?" instead of, "How can I make them approve?" It means reconnecting with friends, values, goals, hobbies, work, faith, creativity, health, and identity outside their emotional control. A narcissistic person may panic when your self-worth no longer depends on their approval because validation is one of their strongest tools. If their praise used to keep you attached and their criticism used to make you chase, they lose influence when both stop controlling you. You can appreciate praise without becoming dependent on it. You can hear criticism without automatically believing it. You can decide whether feedback is useful based on its truth, not based on the emotional power of the person giving it. This shift can be quiet but dramatic. You may stop asking for permission. You may stop sharing every decision. You may stop waiting for them to recognize your value. You may stop trying to win a game where the rules were designed to keep you losing. The narcissistic person may respond by love bombing, insulting, dismissing your growth, or accusing you of changing. In a way, they are right. You are changing. You are becoming less available for control. The sixth psychological move is documenting reality. Narcissistic manipulation often includes gaslighting, denial, revisionist history, and contradiction. One day they said something. Later, they insist they never said it. One day they agreed to a plan. Later, they accuse you of inventing it. One day they insulted you. Later, they claim you are too sensitive, or that you provoked them, or that it was a joke. Over time, this can make you question your memory and perception. Documentation is a quiet but powerful way to stay grounded. It can include saving important messages, keeping communication in writing, maintaining a private journal of incidents, confirming agreements by email, or recording dates and facts after important conversations. The goal is not obsession. The goal is clarity. When someone repeatedly distorts reality, you need a stable record so you do not become dependent on their version of events. Documenting reality can make a narcissistic person panic because it limits their ability to rewrite the story. A manipulative person may feel comfortable lying in vague conversations, but written records create accountability. This is especially important in co-parenting, divorce, workplace conflict, shared finances, caregiving responsibilities, or any situation where facts matter. A simple message like, "To confirm, we agreed that you will drop the children off at 5 p.m. on Friday," can prevent future chaos. In professional settings, following up on our conversation, "My understanding is that the deadline is Tuesday and the deliverable is the final report," keeps communication clear. Narcissistic behavior often thrives in ambiguity because ambiguity can be exploited. Documentation narrows the space for manipulation. It also helps you trust yourself. When you can look back and see patterns clearly, you are less likely to be pulled back by apologies, charm, or denial. The seventh psychological move is walking away without announcing a war. Narcissistic people often expect dramatic exits because drama gives them something to fight, distort, or use for sympathy. They may expect you to send a long goodbye message, expose them publicly, beg for closure, or demand one final conversation. Sometimes, the most powerful move is quiet withdrawal. This does not always mean full no contact. Although no contact can be necessary in emotionally abusive or unsafe relationships, walking away can mean ending an argument, leaving a toxic job, reducing access, declining invitations, stopping late-night emotional labor, refusing to chase after silent treatment, or choosing peace over closure. The important part is that your exit is based on your decision, not on their reaction. You do not need them to understand why you are done. You do not need them to admit what happened. You do not need a perfect final speech. Closure often comes from accepting reality, not from receiving permission to leave. Walking away can make a narcissistic person panic because it removes the central assumption that you will always be available. If they believed you would tolerate anything to keep the connection, your departure disrupts their control. They may try to pull you back with sudden affection, promises, apologies, crises, blame, jealousy, threats, or accusations. This is often called hoovering, a tactic where someone tries to suck you back into the relationship dynamic after you begin to detach. Hoovering can look romantic, desperate, angry, spiritual, practical, or apologetic. The form changes, but the goal is often the same: restore access. That is why walking away must be paired with clarity. You can miss someone and still know they are harmful. You can feel guilty and still protect yourself. You can love someone and still leave a pattern that is destroying you. Understanding these 7 psychological moves requires understanding what narcissistic behavior is actually seeking. Not every selfish, arrogant, or difficult person has narcissistic personality disorder. Only a qualified mental health professional can diagnose a personality disorder. However, narcissistic traits can still harm relationships even without a diagnosis. These traits may include entitlement, lack of empathy, constant need for admiration, hypersensitivity to criticism, blame shifting, manipulation, superiority, jealousy, image management, and difficulty respecting boundaries. The panic response often appears when the narcissistic person senses a loss of control. They may not panic in the way you expect. Some become angry, some become cold, some become charming, some become victimized, some smear your reputation, some disappear and return later, some intensify pressure. The common theme is that your new behavior threatens the old system. One of the biggest mistakes people make when dealing with narcissistic behavior is believing that the right explanation will finally create empathy. You may think, if I can just explain how much this hurts, they will stop. In healthy relationships, explanation can lead to understanding. In manipulative relationships, explanation can become data collection. The person learns what hurts you, what you fear, what you need, and what language makes you stay. That is why emotional restraint matters. You do not owe unlimited vulnerability to someone who has repeatedly weaponized your openness. This does not mean becoming cynical or closed off to everyone. It means becoming discerning. Vulnerability is sacred. It should be shared with people who treat it with care. Another mistake is trying to make the narcissistic person admit they are narcissistic. This usually backfires. Labels can turn into battles. Even when your observations are valid, confronting someone with "you are a narcissist" may trigger rage, denial, mockery, or counterattack. It may also keep you focused on proving what they are, instead of deciding what you will do. A more useful approach is behavior-based. Instead of arguing about diagnosis, pay attention to patterns. Do they respect your no? Do they take responsibility without turning themselves into the victim? Do they apologize and change? Or apologize and repeat? Do you feel safe being honest? Do you feel more like yourself around them, or less? Do conflicts lead to repair, or do they become cycles of blame and punishment? These questions matter more than winning a label debate. Emotional non-reactivity, firm boundaries, gray rock, refusing over defense, validation independence, documentation, and walking away all share one thing. They shift the focus from controlling the narcissistic person to controlling your own participation. This is crucial. You cannot force someone to become honest, empathetic, accountable, or respectful. You can only decide what access they have to you. That decision can feel terrifying if the relationship has trained you to fear their moods. You may feel responsible for their anger, sadness, loneliness, reputation, or crisis. But adults are responsible for their own behavior. You can be compassionate without being controlled. You can wish someone healing without volunteering to be harmed. These psychological moves also work because they bring you back into reality. Narcissistic manipulation often creates a fog where everything feels urgent, personal, and unstable. You may wake up wondering what mood they will be in. You may check your phone constantly. You may rehearse conversations in your head. You may feel anxious before seeing them and exhausted afterward. You may lose interest in things that once made you happy. You may isolate because explaining the relationship to others feels impossible. When you start practicing calm boundaries, your nervous system may initially resist. Peace may feel unfamiliar. Silence may feel unsafe. Not chasing may feel cruel. Saying no may feel dangerous. That does not mean you are doing the wrong thing. It may mean your body is detoxing from chaos. The phrase, "make a narcissist panic," is popular because people who have felt powerless want to know what finally disrupts the control. But the healthiest answer is not revenge. Revenge keeps you emotionally tied to the person who hurt you. It makes their reaction the center of your healing. The real victory is not making them panic. The real victory is becoming free enough that their panic no longer controls your choices. If they panic because you set a boundary, that is information. If they panic because you stop reacting, that is information. If they panic because you document facts, that is information. If they panic because you no longer beg for approval, that is information. Their reaction reveals what the relationship may have been built on. A narcissistic person may test your new boundaries by accusing you of being the problem. They may say you are cold, fake, abusive, dramatic, disrespectful, ungrateful, or influenced by others. This can be especially painful if you have spent years trying to be fair. Remember that people who benefit from your lack of boundaries may experience your boundaries as betrayal. That does not make your boundaries wrong. Imagine someone who has been entering your house without knocking for years. The first time you lock the door, they may say you are rude, but the real issue is not your lock. The real issue is their expectation of unlimited access. Boundaries reveal entitlement. The gray rock method can also be misunderstood. It is not about becoming emotionless in your whole life. It is about becoming emotionally selective around unsafe people. With safe people, you should be able to laugh, cry, share, disagree, repair, and be known. With manipulative people, your emotional openness may need protection. This distinction is important because survivors of narcissistic abuse sometimes become numb as a survival strategy. Numbness is not the goal. Freedom is the goal. You are not trying to become a gray rock forever. You are using neutrality as a shield in specific interactions so you can preserve your real emotional life for places where it is honored. Refusing to defend yourself is another move that requires maturity. Some people hear this and think it means never explaining anything. That is not the point. Healthy relationships require communication. If someone you trust says, "That hurt me," you should care. If you made a mistake, you should listen. If there is confusion, clarification helps. But narcissistic conflict is different because the goalposts move. You explain one thing, and they attack another. You prove one fact, and they change the subject. You apologize for a small mistake, and they use it as proof that everything is your fault. You try to be fair, and they exploit your fairness. At some point, you must recognize when explanation is no longer communication, but captivity. Becoming independent of their validation may be the deepest and slowest move. It is easy to say, "Stop caring what they think," but much harder to live it. If the person is a parent, partner, boss, religious leader, close friend, or someone whose approval shaped your identity, detaching from their validation can feel like losing a part of yourself. Start small. Notice when you're about to make a decision based only on avoiding their disapproval. Ask yourself what you would choose if you were not afraid of their reaction. Reconnect with people who see you clearly. Write down your values. Keep promises to yourself. Make decisions privately before sharing them publicly. Celebrate progress they do not know about. The less they are the audience for your life, the less power they have over your self-worth. Documenting reality is especially helpful when you are dealing with a person who is charming to others. Narcissistic people can be very skilled at impression management. They may appear generous, charismatic, successful, spiritual, funny, or victimized in public while being controlling or cruel in private. This split can make you feel isolated. Others may not believe you because they have only seen the performance. Documentation helps you stay sane even when others do not understand. It also helps if you need legal, workplace, custody, financial, or professional support. Keep records factual, not emotional. Dates, times, screenshots, agreements, incidents, witnesses, and outcomes are more useful than pages of interpretation. This is not about building a revenge file. It is about protecting yourself from distortion. Walking away without announcing a war may be the most liberating move because it ends the fantasy of the perfect final conversation. Many people stay too long because they want the narcissistic person to finally understand. They want an apology that names the harm clearly. They want accountability without excuses. They want the person to become who they pretended to be in the beginning. Sometimes that happens, but often it does not. Waiting for it can cost years of your life. You are allowed to leave without convincing the person who hurt you that you have a good enough reason. You are allowed to choose peace even if they call it weakness. You are allowed to stop participating in a relationship that requires self-abandonment. It is also important to recognize the risks. When a narcissistic person feels control slipping, they may escalate. This can include emotional outbursts, smear campaigns, threats, stalking, financial pressure, legal intimidation, parental alienation, workplace sabotage, or sudden love bombing. If you are in a situation where you fear for your safety, do not rely only on psychological strategies. Reach out to trusted people, domestic violence resources, legal professionals, HR departments, therapists, or local emergency services as appropriate. Safety is more important than proving strength. Sometimes the safest move is not confrontation but careful planning. This may involve securing documents, changing passwords, protecting finances, telling trusted people what is happening, creating an exit plan, or getting professional guidance. The idea of making a narcissist panic can be emotionally satisfying when you are hurt, but healing asks a better question. What helps me become free? Freedom may look like a calm nervous system. It may look like sleeping through the night. It may look like not checking your phone every 5 minutes. It may look like laughing again. It may look like making plans without fear. It may look like saying no without writing a 10-paragraph explanation. It may look like trusting your memory. It may look like letting someone misunderstand you because correcting them would cost too much. It may look like choosing people who do not require you to shrink. These 7 psychological moves are effective because they attack the root of manipulative control. Access to your emotions, your attention, your self-doubt, and your need for approval. Emotional non-reactivity protects your nervous system. Firm boundaries protect your time, body, privacy, and values. Gray rock protects your energy in unavoidable contact. Refusing to overdefend protects your mind from endless false trials. Validation independence protects your identity. Documentation protects your reality. Walking away protects your future. Together, they form a practical strategy for dealing with narcissistic behavior without becoming manipulative yourself. A narcissistic person may panic when you stop reacting because your emotional reactions once reassured them that they mattered in the most controlling way. They may panic when you set boundaries because boundaries prove you are separate. They may panic when you use gray rock because drama no longer produces attention. They may panic when you refuse to defend yourself because accusations no longer trap you. They may panic when you stop needing their approval because praise and criticism no longer steer your life. They may panic when you document reality because lies become harder to maintain. They may panic when you walk away because the relationship no longer revolves around their power. But their panic is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is your healing, your safety, and your integrity. In the end, the most powerful psychological move is not a clever phrase or a secret tactic. It is the decision to stop abandoning yourself. Narcissistic behavior often trains you to prioritize someone else's ego over your own peace. Recovery means reversing that training. You learn to pause before reacting. You learn to say no without begging to be understood. You learn to protect your private life You learn to trust patterns more than promises. You learn that love without respect is not safety. You learn that chemistry is not compatibility. You learn that guilt is not always a sign you did something wrong. Sometimes it is a sign you're doing something new. You learn that people who truly care about you do not need to control you to feel secure. If you are currently dealing with narcissistic behavior, begin with the move that feels safest and most realistic. You do not have to transform overnight. You might start by making your replies shorter. You might stop answering messages immediately. You might write down what happened after confusing conversations. You might practice saying, "I am not discussing this while being insulted." You might stop sharing personal information with someone who uses it against you. You might tell a trusted friend the truth. You might schedule therapy. You might create distance. Every small act of self-protection matters. The narcissistic person may notice before you feel strong. That is okay. Strength often begins quietly. The ultimate goal is not to make anyone panic. The ultimate goal is to become unpanicked yourself. When you are no longer ruled by their moods, accusations, approval, silence, or chaos, you become free in a way that manipulation cannot easily reach. That freedom may unsettle anyone who benefited from your fear. Let it. Your peace is not an attack. Your boundaries are not cruelty. Your clarity is not arrogance. Your refusal to be controlled is not abuse. It is recovery.